Hey guys, what's happening? Where have I been? Well, holidays happen. When the holidays happen, it gets very busy. That's all I can tell you. And I have learned to sort of shut down for the holidays. Something I learned from the great trumpet player Pete Bond, formerly of the Met Orchestra, who talked about taking breaks during the summer. And I realized that it was actually good for your face and for your musculature. And he did it between his seasons because that made sense for him. But I found that at the end of the year, it's a good time to take a little time off from the horn and take a time off from everything because it's family time and I'm all in. And basically from a little after Thanksgiving perhaps on, it's every day. There's holiday stuff going on. So my holidays get very, very busy. It is a party. I have a blast. I eat all the food. I drink all the drink. And I have a really, really good time. And but when it's over, it's over. I'm totally pumped to get started on a new year. I want to dive right into it though. This is going to be the title here is going to be a little provocative, and I want to come out right at the front end of this and say I am not trying to be a provocateur. And I promise you I'm not looking for a fight. I promise you I'm not looking for a fight. And it seems that they're unavoidable somehow. I was watching online actual artists, people who do visual art, talking about their concerns about AI art, for instance, and saying if you want to do art, if you really want to do art, you could pick up a pencil and a piece of paper and do art. And these guys were pilloried. Now visual art like that it might be tougher than being a jazz musician. I mean, it's hard, right? You'd think that they're trying to defend, all of that knowledge that they had to learn, correctly so that they could do their thing. And they were pilloried and being called haters, and you don't like the democratization of all these. And I just didn't think it was that unfair of an observation to make. They certainly didn't. You're just angry because you have. They weren't. People were psychoanalyzing them, and you mean this and you think that. When they probably don't, they certainly didn't. Anyway, it just seemed somewhat innocuous, frankly, and boy, people were on them. So I have a great deal of hesitancy. I guess my preface is this is a personal view. What I'm going to throw at you today is a personal view, but I'd like to think, I went to a good music school. I played jazz in the village. My music got played on terrestrial radio in Paris. I composed music for modern dance. My music was played at the Guggenheim in Manhattan. That was pretty freaking cool. I've had some cool freaking moments. I don't think I'm clueless. I think I have some right, especially my advanced dotage or whatever. I've been around a while, and it doesn't make me right. But it doesn't automatically make me wrong either. Let me start with a story, and we'll get there. But understand, at least at the outset, that I am coming at you a bit hat in hand. And this is just the way I see it. And you could disagree with me violently. It's fine. It's fine. Okay? I'm just trying to find, in an atmosphere where I see a great deal of pedantry, and I see dilettantism like crazy, and I don't see enough of a balance between authorship and artistic message and technical ability, the wedding of them the way it sort of should be. Anyway, I was asked recently about the sort of things that get you started playing, in my case, trumpet. What made you play the trumpet? And for me, I know what it was. And there were a couple things that happened. In 1973, I grew up in southern Maine. My dad took us to South Portland, Maine. There was a ballroom, and the Stan Kenton Orchestra was playing there. My dad was a big Kentonite from the 50s. He loved Kenton for its absolutely brutish, brutalist, I suppose, approach to dissonance and loud and presence and all of that. And he loved Brubeck because he loved how all of that pulled everything back. So he had pretty good musical taste, considering he really wasn't a musician. He'd sung as a kid, but he wasn't really a trained musician. So he's more of a theater guy, honestly. But he loved Kenton, and so Kenton was coming by, and he brought the whole family, and we went and sat. It was sort of like, I don't think it was dinner theater. We were at tables from here, but I don't think they were serving food. Not that it matters, but we were at like a front table, and there was the Kenton Orchestra, and I really wasn't prepared for this. I was 7 years old, and they blew my socks off, and of course, I couldn't know what I was reacting to or why, but I only knew that, oh my God, the presence of it, the volume of it, the blending of all those notes, it changed my life, right? And particularly it was the trumpets, because the trumpets were the top of the ziggurat, the apex, the alpha predator, right? It was that. I remember thinking that those notes like struck me like a diamond bullet. I was just transfixed by this. I just loved it. And I bugged my folks for a trumpet for years, and then finally, when they figured I was big enough to hold one and play one, I got one. But there was that. And I think for me, and this may not be the same for everybody, obviously, but I don't think I'm alone in this. I think other people will definitely be able to relate, is that I felt it more than most people do. I felt it so strongly. And I think some people just have the artistic temperament. All right, for whatever reason, usually they're a little emotionally screwed. I was a very sensitive kid. I cried at the drop of a hat. Not everything. I felt everything so much. And I felt this too. And it was overwhelming, and I loved it. And I could not get enough. So that was the beginning, and I became a trumpet player and so forth. Now, I'll give you one other thing. When I was growing up, I have an older brother. My older brother loved drum corps, got into drum corps. And so we would go see, and I was probably in middle school this time, we would go see drum corps shows in the Boston, Massachusetts area. And I loved it. And it's kind of, I was falling in love with the sound of brass. I really loved that sound, the sound of brass. And drum corps is so present on those G bugles they played at that time. It had a different timbre and certainly seemed louder than what we would get today. Today's horn lines are great too. I'm not knocking today's horn lines; they're fantastic. But there was something about the difference in timbre. But anyway, the point is, yes, the rest of it was great, and the contest was great, and the uniforms were great, and all the moving was great, and all that was fine. But man, it was still about the sound. And when you think about it, a drum corps is a brass choir. They had the soprano bugle, basically a G trumpet, right? Mellophone, baritone, and what they called contras, which were, of course, same as tubas, but called them contras because they were G tubas. But it's soprano, alto, tenor, bass. It's the same as, a string section, same as a vocal choir. It's that same 4 parts, basically. Yes, there are different notes within it, but 4 voices at any rate. And the blend of that, oh my Lord, all right? And I think there's something very specific about it. I remember, particularly with Wayne Downey Blue Devil arrangements, that a chord would come, maybe you'd hear the contras lay down that bass note, and then the baries, the trumpets, the sopranos, and then you'd wait a beat or two, and then the mellophones would come in, that alto voice to complete the chord. Oh my Lord, what that did to you. And that's where I want to talk about what it did to you. It curved your spine. It was such a rush and release to hear that chord. It was one chord and then, ding, oh! What was that? What was that? And I am going to submit that the wonderful thing about music is there are no words, right? Especially, in non-vocal music, these sort of situations, there are no words, right? And yet, the chord meant one thing, and then with that extra note, it now meant something else. There was an emotional change. Music speaks in emotions. The emotions, what were we getting off on? Was it a technical thing? Well, a lot of that to appreciate, definitely. But in the end, what you were appreciating was the arrangements, the writing, and how the notes emotionally affected you, and that you derived from it meaning. You couldn't say specifically, you couldn't point it, right? Well, then there was no meaning. No, wrong. No, there was definitely, it meant something. In a very hazy, non-specific way, but it still meant something. Somebody was saying something. Things were being communicated. Your emotions were being manipulated, clearly on purpose. Rangers know what they're doing. So I want this payoff. Composers still speak it sometimes in those terms. But that was it. For me, musically, that was it. I wanted to be connected to those emotions. I wanted that meaning. That's what I wanted. So, I remember as a little kid, 5th, 6th grade, gonna be in the band. And I figured that probably the first thing we would be talking about, the most obvious thing that we should be talking about, right? If you were in an English class, if they were going to talk about the book, they'd talk about what the book meant, what the intention of the author was. Forget about, we'd get to the reading, but before you read it, you need to know what it was about. That didn't happen in a musical situation. All it was about was play the notes right. Nobody wanted to talk about what the music was saying, or that even saying that the music does say something, that by itself was almost, that's taboo. We don't talk about that. It's the most obvious thing. It's the first thing we should be talking about. It's not something we don't talk about. And guess what? That continued forever, in large part through high school. In college, it got different because in college now we're talking about those sort of things did come up more, but it was still really all about play the right notes. We never got past instrument, instrument, instrument. I was playing the instrument to get close to the meaning, to those chords, to be in the middle of that. That's what I wanted. It's what interested me. It's still what interests me. But there's a whole world of folks that didn't want to talk about that. I thought that was, but I remember I went to Berklee College of Music, and one of the reasons, Berklee wasn't too far away. I grew up in Maine. Boston wasn't that far away. I could go to school there. I had great respect for what Berklee was all about. I liked that. I liked the fact that they weren't like every other school, and intentionally were not. I thought I would get more of what I was looking for from a school like that than, say, some school that was more of a conservatory that I thought would be stricter and wouldn't want to discuss these things. And on some level, we did get to discuss it at Berklee. I also thought that that if I went to a good music school, that it would provide me with, a college degree would provide me with the gravitas to speak on a subject like this, and that I might have some influence. I might be able to say, again, I wasn't a crank. I was someone with a musical education. I should be able to have an intellectual discussion, say, why aren't we attacking this more? Why aren't we talking about this more? What I've noticed since I got out of college is that tendency, which was bad, has only got vastly worse. We're at a point now, and I see this in many traditions. I see it in pop music. I see it in classical music. I definitely see it in jazz music. It's so bad in jazz music, I don't want to have anything to do with jazz music anymore. One of the things that showed me just how far this trend has gone is, when I was at Berklee and we were studying jazz, we did talk about each note that you played in the course of an improvisation. That each note had meaning. Each note had a particular emotional effect, and that you should be aware of every note that you're playing, but we were thinking of it in that context. These days, I've said this before, I've never heard the playing be better, but I see no intentionality behind it. I saw one recently, a couple piano players, and they were talking about, if you have this kind of chord, see, you play this over, doesn't that sound cool? And it did sound fantastic. They weren't playing it for any other reason other than, this is accepted dogma, and it sounds cool. Well, okay, it sounds cool, but that's a little shallow. I mean, what are you trying to say with that? They wouldn't know how to answer it. They would not even. To them, music is just atoms bouncing against other atoms. And if you put them in the right order, you're correct. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. There's a ton of that. I know classical musicians who have told me, sort of on the QT, that increasingly they see younger classical musicians who are just machines. They're great. They sound, again, great playing, but it's soulless, and they're not even trying to admit that they would be saying anything. That all that they're there to do is to be these perfect machines, and that's the game. Isn't that fun? Look, at some level, that's always existed with like studio musicians who. They had no artistic mission. They were guns for hire. They went in and played perfectly. And some people think that's the apex. That is what... I have great respect for that, but kind of empty. But even in popular styles, you really don't hear anything terribly new going on. No one's taking a chance. And the stuff that's hugely successful, you've heard everything that they're doing done before. They're just rehashing it for a new crowd that didn't hear it the last time it came along, you know? So, you know, gee, Dave, you're bitter and you're angry. I don't think of myself as a bitter, angry guy. But I am, I would consider one of the great disappointments in my life. Not so much I'm not so much disappointed in myself, but I mean, I'm a bit misanthropic. I'll admit I don't have a lot of faith in human beings. And, you know, you look at the history of what we've lived through, you know, we've made a lot of bad choices as a society over and over and over again. You know, it's hard not to sit there and go, boy, we're doing a great job. We're not doing a great job. We let the education system, you know, go into the toilet. We elected Nixon and George Bush twice. We can't figure out whether Nazism is a bad thing. Maybe it's good. I don't. What do you think? I don't know. I don't want to think about it. No. You know, I mean, we're a mess. So, you know, but I'm amazed that a thing I think most people get. Most people are attracted to music because of that sense of meaning. And I think there's authorship. I believe in authorship. I think, you know, the intention of the artist has to be taken into consideration. Now, there is a totally valid argument to say, hey, listen, every listener completes the work. That it doesn't matter what they intended because you're going to decide what it means for you, right? I'm halfway on board with that. Yes, all of us do complete the work. That is true. That the piece is not completed until you as a listener hear it, process it, and you decide for yourself what it means. I agree with that. All right? Again, by me saying that, I hope, pardon me, I hope you recognize I am trying to find a balance here. You know, I'm not saying, oh, no, I'm right and everything else. No, there are very, very good, valid points to be made about the importance of technique. I'm a huge person about the importance of technique. But if there's all technique and there's no ability for the message or the art, you know, I'm not, gee, I really think we should all be dilettantes. No, but if we're all one way, I would like to balance it out and get some of those other influences. I don't want to go over here either. I want that sweet spot. And it's not even a sweet spot. It's a nice wide area where lots of good stuff can happen. So yes, I do think the individual completes the work. Yes, I think that's true. At the same time, it's good to know what the author intended. Right? If you read Camus, name a great author, you know, Conrad, Hemingway. If you read great writers, well, they weren't a perfect person, so therefore we're going to cancel all their work. No, okay. Most of them are going to have all sorts of issues. That's called humans. Let's get in their head. Let's know what they were thinking. Let's clean it up and sanitize it. No. Let's take it for what it was. A lot of the times there's gonna be all sorts of screwed stuff, and they were all sorts of screwed people. Wow, human beings, messy. How about that? So that's okay. And it doesn't have to rule what you think of the piece, but to be more informed, to have that piece too is part of what's in your brains, you know. So you go, well, he thought he was doing this and that. It's interesting. I never looked at it that way. I like it the way, like, okay. A lot of times you may find you were right, dead on. You go, oh my God, I think that is so gorgeous. But what you listen to some Ravel and you're like, it's dreamy and this. What did he think? Oh, he thought it was dreamy. He thought it was the same thing. Yeah. In other words, his message did communicate to you. Spot on. Wow. It doesn't always happen. It doesn't have to happen. But it can happen. It's cool. You know, what do we take away from in the end? It's those moments where you felt something. I think that's it. I think that's it. And I see so many musicians who are just trying to be perfect players. And I practice every day too. I'm still trying to get better. And I am. Okay, great. But in the end, it's got to be about, what about all the stuff? All the really subtle music where there wasn't a lot of technique. Brian Eno's music for airports, or a lot of his ambient music, didn't require incredible technique. Incredibly effective. Miles Davis. Not the perfect trumpet player. Oh well. But listen to some of that stuff. I got one for you the other day. I hear, you see it on Instagram, say, all the time. I think Instagram's a lot of fun. I have fun with it. And a lot of musicians on there. And you hear some incredible trumpet players. And good jazz players. Guys playing tons of shit. And there's a lot of them. There's so many. That's why, I'm not in a competition with the other jazz guys. I got to do it. I did that when I was younger and I had a blast. I had my moments. I had some good moments. But I'm looking at all these, I've seen all these guys play some great stuff, and wow. And then I came across a clip of Chet Baker later on, not young Chet Baker, later on Chet Baker. I'm not sure what he was playing over, but a few things struck me. It was obvious he wasn't just playing some pattern he'd learned. He was in the moment. There's no high wire act if you're just playing stuff you already know and you learned all these patterns. That's not playing jazz. So part of it is, I think, supposed to be and always was. And, I'm old enough to have known, I got to meet some of those old cats. That's one of the things here. There's a disconnect with younger players because they didn't get to see Clark Terry and they didn't get to talk to Art Farmer and they didn't get to do any of that. Those guys told you, they told us repeatedly. I remember seeing a clinic with Lee Konitz, my God, Red Rodney, amazing, some of these guys. But you were supposed to put some of you in it, and you weren't supposed to, you were figuring it out in the moment and using your ear and going places. I remember seeing this Chet thing, and he clearly went for something just because he heard it in the moment. He really took a risk. It could have fallen apart, and it didn't. It wasn't perfect playing because he didn't know exactly what he was going to be doing next. And it was so much more effective. I have a tendency with jazz now to say, all the jazz that seem to have that soul, and I'm not saying, there are criticisms I'll accept, there are criticisms I won't. I don't like the generational argument. You go, it was from people from your generation. No, it's not people from my generation. Most of the great jazz happened well before I was around. The great jazz really happened, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I was born in the 60s, so I wasn't around for it. I caught these guys later after the music had died and been somewhat resurrected. All right, so I was at the edges of that too. But I think to some degree that style was connected to its time, to those decades when it was more relevant and more part of the culture. Rick Beato says rock is dead. I think you could make a real good argument that it had a time, and you can write or play in that style, but it's not never going to be 1968 again or 1974 again. It ain't. And good God, I don't think people in 1920s want to sound like 1874. I think correctly they want to sound like their time. And I'm increasingly, that's where I'm going with things. And, you know, I whenever I run into music education, I never see, it's terribly depressing to me that I don't see music teachers talk to the kids about what the music means. If it's out there, great, but whenever I bump into music education, I don't see it. And I never have. And it's become its own little world of, well, we play in the band and we play our band parts right. And that the idea of doing anything creative is just that the whole of music to that scene seems to be, go play your parts right. Go play, somebody else did something creative. We don't, no. Now now it's our job to be worker bees and play somebody else's music right. I don't see the encouragement to go write your own music, do your own music, create your own thing. School band programs aren't into that. They don't do that. I'm sure there are guys out there who encourage their kids to write with good music theory classes, who probably tell their kids to write for small groups and stuff like that. That's great. That's great. To the degree that that happens, that's great. I'm sure it happens. In the main, I don't see it. If you've ever heard school bands, holy Jesus. And they can sound fantastic. And there are good programs. There are some great programs out there. But even the programs that sound great, I've just gotten really, really good at go play the notes. So, you know, it's a tad depressing. So, but I'm going to speak to you like you're me. We're adults, right? What do? We could decry the situation, and I don't think there's anything wrong with me mentioning this. It's one of those things no one wants to talk about, and we should be. But you also can't spend all your time worrying about it, and I'm hardly worried about it. I think our job is to not to intentionally play music from another period of time, to be some kind of museum piece. I think it's our job to figure out what we could do with our art that reflects our time. Make a statement that's emotional about the time that we live in. I think that's our job. That's what we can do. And if we can do that, I think we can, and I think you can't aim the ball, I'm going to do this because it's going to be successful, or and it's going to be about Mark. No. Just do some good work. And then, with luck, there'll be a way to find a home. But I think if you do work that you feel strongly about, and that is good, you at least increase your odds that someone will check it out. Music business and all that stuff, oh my God, it's an entirely different world, often very corrupt. Has nothing to do with, certainly doesn't have anything to do with playing music. It's, who's friends with who and all that, and it always has been. It's, but I think just to be able to keep your sanity, that the gig has to be do something that you feel right about. But at the same time, don't I hear a lot of people say, oh, you can't say this, you can't say that sort of thing. It's okay to call it what it is. There's nothing wrong with that. It's interesting. I was talking about it recently. This fall, my son applied to colleges. He's senior high school. Applied to all these colleges, and he applied to 8 schools, good schools, and he got into all 8. He's in the video editing and design and graphic design. He's a talented kid, but this is a very conservative town. The arts are not appreciated here. I know how he feels, and he's not your everyday. He is very quiet. It's a town of football players. They're not going to get him or understand him here. But he got into Syracuse University, the Newhouse School, which is probably, that Northwestern, I guess, probably the best communication school in the country. The town here, they consistently underestimated. Didn't know. They had English teachers who didn't like him. He's going to go to the best communication school in the country. He had an 8th grade English teacher who couldn't get him. That wasn't my son's fault. And one of the things I've been doing recently is I keep score. I keep score of all the good people, and there have been some very good people along the way. Okay? And I send them notes. One of his English teachers when he was a 7th grader, helped turn a lot of things around for my guy. And I sent him a note and said, hey, man, this is on you. This happens to a degree because you got that. You changed the trajectory, right? So I think you do have to be very appreciative of good teachers, right? But fairness, a sense of fairness, this doesn't mean mean. This is a sense of fairness. And a correct accounting means there's also lots of people who didn't get it right. You're not angry at them. You don't hate them. And you don't forget. They screwed up. They got it wrong. They made a bet on this kid and his future, and they got it wrong. And they didn't just get it wrong by a little bit. They got it wrong badly. You can note that. You're allowed to say, gee, they got it wrong. This guy got it right. These guys got it right. This guy got it wrong. Yeah, and from that experiment of one, you could draw some conclusions. That is a perfectly fair thing to do. Perfectly fair. And again, from where I sit, looking at the music business, and all the things that have gone on, and all the things I've been able to observe, and incredibly talented people who've gotten nowhere, which is just crazy, and people who were not much, but boy, they were at the right parties. And oh my God, it's okay to look back at it and sit there and go, wow, what a mess. And you do tend to be a little more forgiving, and you realize it has nothing to do, we all have moments, and that's great, but very little of this has that much to do. It's talk about the atoms bouncing into each other, and so that you don't, yes, you do all the best practices, and yes, you try to be friendly, certainly, and somebody easy to work with, and all those things. But if you think it's all on you, it reminds me of actors auditioning. Really good actors can go in and just not get the gig because I remember hearing an actor talk about they know within 3 seconds that you're not right for the part. And it could be a spectacular actor. That's not what they were looking for. So you can't, it's all on me. I'm not good enough. Boy, we're so quick to do that. Like at this point, with all the stuff that I've done out there, on my good days when I'm doing things well, I'm okay with that. I don't entirely stink. Yes, every one of us who especially plays this unforgiving hunk of metal that I play. If you're a trumpet player, boy, every day you sit and go, oh my God, it's a tough horn, yeah, and it makes life a bear on you. But on balance, yeah, when you're at your best, you are certainly capable of doing it. You have a right to have an opinion. You've got a good education. Yeah, you've spent a life doing this. You know some things. So it's okay. Again, you want to get a big, you don't want to get a big head, but you also don't want to be so, mustn't say anything. No, you have every right to have your opinion and voice that. Again, people could disagree, and that's fine. But just as an artsy person, since the whole shoot match is screwed, and it kind of always has been, then there's no reason in God's green earth why you should just do what you want to do. When it's all said and done, you'll feel so much better. You sit there and go, yeah, well, the world's going to do what the world's going to do. But at least I stayed true to myself. I did my thing. Anyway, that's what I got for you guys today. I think feel free to get a hold of me about my knocking music ed. There are good things happening there, but man, in my life, on balance, overall, they've been wrong. They teach what they teach in a totally ass-backwards, incorrect way. I know professional players who talk about, this is interesting. I'm near New York City. I know a lot of guys playing in the city. And top trumpet player I know there was talking about, think about the amount of talent in New York City. How much of it gets asked to go to schools? And can you imagine they were in the public schools, what they could do? And some of them do, and there are moments. But in the main, public school doesn't want that talent near them. They've got their own little scene. And they're very threatened by people who can do it. Don't think that doesn't exist, because it does. You'd think, being good educators, they'd want to bring in they're right there, the best of the brightest. No, they'd lose control. Make sure you play your notes. Incredible. It's incredible. I'd say it's a scandal, except everyone just accepts it. I just never have. So there you go. Feel free to call me names, disagree with me, say what a bad guy I am. I just think it's hard. If I was outside of music, then I'd sit there and go, okay, you don't understand. You haven't been. But I've been around it my whole life, and I know plenty of people who are teachers, good teachers, and I like them, and I think they do a good job. But there is this thing that I've noticed, this inability to deal with meaning and what music can mean, and I think that's there. I think the works of Beethoven have meaning. I think Brahms has meaning. I think all various jazz works have meaning. When Herbie Hancock plays one of those unbelievable voicings and it twists you and does, that has meaning. Happens at pop music. Happens at rock. Happens at all sorts of things where it hits you and it does. That's it. That's the game, and that's what we should be talking about. And I worry about musicians, and I worry about a crowd that would be running from that, embarrassed of that. We're not talking the same language. We're not even in the same thing for the same reasons anymore. So I don't think those cats like me. No wonder they don't. They don't want me around, right? Or people like me, really is what I'm saying. So, fascinating. It's fascinating. Let me know if you have any thoughts on it. Hopefully I won't get myself too much trouble with this. And I will see you fairly soon, because there's all sorts of stuff. There's always all sorts of stuff to talk about. Take care, guys.